What's up, everybody? It's Bob from Garage Dwellers Woodworking, and in today's video I'm going to walk you through the Woodpeckers hole boring jig. We're going to talk about what comes with the kit. I'm going to show you how I used it to make my MFT top on my workbench, and at the end we'll go through some pros, cons, and I'll let you know if I'd recommend that you buy it. So let's go. All right, guys, well, welcome back to the channel. If you're a new viewer, thanks for coming and checking things out. So first of all, I want to make clear that I'm not sponsored in any way. I don't have any sponsors. I bought all this stuff with my own money. So the review that you're getting today is from the perspective of someone just like you who is looking to figure out if this is right for them, who wound up purchasing it and using it to make an entire big MFT top for my outfeed assembly bench, which if you haven't seen me build that, there will be a link at the end and a link in the description to the playlist where you can go check out how I did that build, and specifically you can see this MFT top get built. So first things first, why would you buy this? Who is it for? This is for anybody who's looking to make a custom MFT style top with dog holes in the Festool MFT3 style spacing. This would also be for somebody who is an MFT3 owner who uses their MFT a lot, it gets chewed up, and they frequently are needing to buy new tabletops. Now, first things first, let's talk price, because that's an important factor. When you look at this kit, for me, I got the kit that includes everything. So you get two different sets of dogs. I got the 20 millimeter and the 3/4. It comes with all of the stuff you need. Comes with your template. So you get this really nice template to work through, and obviously a set of instructions. If you buy that kit with everything, right now if you go to woodpeck.com, that is $200. If you know that you're a 20 millimeter or a 3/4 person, that's $140 just for those individual kits alone. So right out of the box, what comes with the kit? Well, everything that you see here, you get a set of instructions, you get this foam molded box with all of your equipment, and then you get this template that comes. When you open up the box, for me, I got the kit that includes both the 20 millimeter dogs and the 3/4 dogs. If you just get either the 20 millimeter or the 3/4, then the box would probably look something like this, I would assume. I've got 3 locating pins, and these are going to go into my template to square up against my edge and give me the correct spacing. If you get the kit that has both the 20 millimeter and the 3/4, they've included the guide bushings that are specific for both. Now they've done a really nice thing here. On the inside of each guide bushing, for the 3/4, there's 2 different grooves, and for the 20 millimeter on the inside, there's a single groove. So they include that in the instructions to let you know which one goes with which, but then they've also smartly packaged it so that these things line up. So these are my 3/4 dogs, that goes with the 3/4 bushing, and vice versa with the 20 millimeter. So beyond that, you get this template, which this is going to be what you're going to use to route everything out. Now, obviously, I used this thing, so it's a little bit marked up and scuffed up. Came beautiful from the manufacturer. For the Festool MFT3 currently, there is a 70 millimeter offset between the edge of the table and the edge of your first dog. That is on both sides, and this is going to give you that. There's also, specifically for the MFT3 in this design, these dog holes are designed with the exact same geometry. So again, 96 millimeter spacing between all of these holes to give you that perfect MFT3 geometry. All right, so now that you've seen the walkthrough of the jig, let's go back a couple months here to when I was building this MFT3 top for my outfeed assembly bench. I'll show you how I initially set it up, some of the tips and tricks that I used to make it work efficiently, and then like I said, at the end of the video here, we are going to talk about pros, cons, and whether or not I'd recommend this to you. So keep watching till the end. The way that this thing works, as you can see, I've got these 3 pins here. So I've already started my cuts. I just wanted to make sure things were accurate before I started filming too much. You put these 2 as close to the edge as you can. Obviously, this is pretty square, but the smaller area that I could reference off of initially, the more square that small area will be. So I've got my 2 pins here referencing that edge. You clamp it down to your surface, again, making sure that your pins are actually in contact with your reference edges, and then you bore the holes that you are able to bore. It comes with 3 of these. So these are these little dogs that you actually put in once you've finished boring the holes. So I've bored enough holes now. Obviously, all these holes currently are really difficult to do because I've got my clamps and because I've got these pins. So what I'll do, use these three, they will reference this. I remove my clamps, I can remove my pins, I can bore out the rest of the holes, and then this will work like a grid where I use these to then make the grid the rest of the way. So the way the jig is designed to work is you put in the proper bushing for whatever size dog holes you're going for, and then I'm using a 1/2-inch spiral upcut bit. You need to think about the thickness of your material. Here I was using 3/4 MDF, so I had to plunge halfway, do the routing for the circle, plunge the rest of the way, finish off the routing. Obviously, if you were using thinner material, you could probably get away with doing this in one pass, depending on the router that you're using. So this should be an ad for Festival Dust Collection, because that's 3/4 MDF that we're going through. So what you saw me do is I went back after I bored this hole. MDF, once you cut it, will swell a little bit. So I went back, just redid this. Hopefully you could see at the start of the video, when I went to move one of these and put it in there initially, it didn't fit. Now it does. So something that becomes readily apparent once you use this, and was one of the biggest complaints that I heard about this before purchasing it, is how much this thing moves or how much flex is in here when it's not clamped down. So our initial cuts, we put these pins in to reference our square edge. I've got this here, and I've got a clamp here, I've got a clamp here. It's not moving. It's super stable. You get your first bunch of cuts done. You wait to take the clamps off until everything is really square. Good to go. Your last 1 or 2 cuts, you have to take those clamps off, but if you wanted to, you could even reposition them. However, something becomes pretty obvious the minute that you start playing with this. So I've got my pins in that are up against the workpiece here, referencing my square edge. And, you know, Woodpeckers provides these little dogs that go in. So they have a 20mm portion on the bottom to fit the hole you just drilled. And then they've got this circumference here that fits into the jig itself. Well, number one, you know, just as with any kind of human process, some of these dogs are 19mm, some of them are 21. So the fit is a little bit different. This one is pretty tight. I go up to this one's a little bit looser. When I put these in, even with the reference pins, and as you can see 3 of these in here, there's just the slightest amount of play to it, right? And then if I take these pins out, there's even more play to it. Most noticeably, if you put 3 of these reference markers in one line, that's when you can see the most flex. So this was a complaint from a lot of people. I knew about it before I bought it. It wasn't something that really deterred me from getting it. So when I go to advance this, I have a couple options. If I know that I've got a really long straight edge, I could leave these pins in on this edge. I can keep clamping, and so at least I would know that my first row is nice and tight, and then I could sort of work off of that. There are some people who are just using this as a clamping surface and don't want that perfect geometry that Festool has with the 96mm spacing, the 20mm holes to get you nice square cuts as a setup like your MFT. If that's the case, then it doesn't matter exactly how precise it is, and this isn't a concern for you. If I put all 3 of these in one line, that's really when I'm going to see the most wiggle and the most flex out of this. So one thing that we can do is play with how many holes we're using and not putting them all in one line. So if I triangulate my holes here, there's definitely less slop. Even better, if I wanted to, I could do this. So triangulate myself across that span, a little less slop. Triangulating in 3 different rows, even less. It still moves though, right? So that's something that is definitely a concern. And let's be honest, if I'm doing this, A, I've still got slop, and B, I'm going to be able to route this hole, I'm going to be able to route this hole, but I'm going to basically be doing 2 at a time, and then having to kind of slowly work my way around, move this, route this hole. It's going to make the process a little bit longer. Fortunately, I think there's a really good solution with this that, as I've templated things out and looking at this on the bench, I think is going to work really well. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to start by putting this back to where I had it originally. All right, so that is nice and tight. There is very minimal wiggle there. I'm going to go ahead and press this up against these pins as I had it before. Now here's what I'm going to do. I've got a straight edge with my rail from a track saw. You don't need a track saw to do this. Any kind of straight edge will do. Bora and other companies sell nice cheap straight edges. You could get a long, level. You could get a piece of wood that you know to have been jointed to a nice flat straight edge. But something that's a nice straight edge. So I'm going to bring this right up against my jig. And again, I'm going to make sure that I'm referencing here, just as I was. I'm going to bring that right there. Now, putting a little tension here to make sure, again, I'm keeping my reference where it should be. I bring this end until that is flush up against the jig. So now my straight edge is completely flush against this jig. I can take my straight edge, in this case my track from my track saw, and I'm going to go ahead and clamp it down. Again, just making sure before I clamp the other side that I'm good. I've got good contact here and here. Go ahead and clamp this on the other side. Now, I'm good. I really don't have any movement here. If there is any movement, you can redo your clamping, but this is pretty good. So let's move it down a little bit and we'll see how it looks. All right, so I've gone ahead and removed my pins. I've got my straight edge clamped up nice. I'm gonna go ahead and slide it down so that I'm working with 2 rows at a time. So again, we know if we put these dogs into 1 row, like I said before, that's the most deflection. So I'm gonna go ahead, find some holes that are pretty tight here, plop that in, again using a triangle type pattern, and now that's really not going anywhere. It feels nice and tight. There's maybe a tiny bit of movement right out here at the end, but really minimal. And I've gone ahead and templated this out. So I just took, again, because I'm using black laminate, I went ahead and took some white pencil lead and followed myself down, made sure that my holes are all going to be in a good place. And looking at this, as I go down here, getting all the way to the end, these holes line up perfectly. And as I measured this, there is a very slight, again, across a 70-inch span from here over to here, 1 millimeter difference. It's 1 millimeter deeper here than it is down at that end. 1 millimeter over 70 inches, I'm pretty good with that. And again, what really matters to me is that I'm keeping this geometry so that I can get good square cuts using this like an MFT top. So we're going to go ahead, set this in, and start drilling. Alright, so one little problem that I've run into here, the track is slightly higher than the jig. We will need to figure out a way, because obviously, just kind of looking at this, A, I couldn't quite get to my full plunge depth here, but B, it's going to create an ever so slight cant sort of that way. I'm going to go ahead and use one of my clamps. Clamp this bad boy in place, right where I know I want it to be. That's pretty solid. And now I can just move this out of the way for the moment. Yeah, that's good. That's not going anywhere. Get these 2 done, and then we'll be able to, with this clamp in place, set it back and move on. Alright, so again, with this thing in place, we're going to go ahead and just slide this back. I'm going to go ahead and relax here. Make sure that I am nice and tight up against it. Clamp it back in place. And then I'm just going to confirm that I'm in the same spot. So I've been measuring this from this reference edge. .313 there. keep going. Now you can see that I used the track across the width and across the first section of depth, but for whatever reason after I did this I found that things were really tightening up and I didn't have to use the track really except for making sure alignment was good the rest of the time, and it worked out perfectly well. Alright, so that's the kit, that's how you use it. Now let's talk pros and cons and recommendations here. In terms of cons, I think the price is obviously the big barrier that a lot of people see to this. They look at a lot of Woodpeckers stuff and they say it's just too expensive. You know, if I'm just getting, let's say, the 20mm kit or the 3/4 kit, it's $140. If I'm getting both together, that is $200. It's a lot to spend. However, if you think about it, I was looking at prices yesterday online for a genuine Festool replacement MDF top for your MFT3. Those are running about $125 right now. So, you know, I've seen them as low as 70, 125 being the most I've seen them for. You got to decide how much you're using your MFT3 and whether you're frequently replacing those tops. Now, an MFT3 top, obviously that's something that you can flip over, get both sides out, so you get a lot of value out of that. But what if you're making something like this that's completely custom, right? It's not just specific for the MFT3. You're going to need some way of making the dog holes in the geometry that you want, and this gives you a quick, easy way to do that. The other thing that I think is the big barrier for people, and that was the major complaint that I saw when I was researching this, was that little bit of wobble. As I showed you, I think you can get that wobble out with just a few simple things. Some people will probably say, well, I'm paying a lot of money for this, it's a premium product, it shouldn't have that. And I understand that reaction, certainly, and I don't fault you if that's your reaction to it. The way that I look at it is, given the complexity of designing something like this worked really well. And if I have to do a little bit of extra work just to make sure things are perfectly laid out, that doesn't bother me. If that's a big barrier for you and you want something that is just completely 100% right out of the box, maybe that's going to be a problem for you. All right, so let's talk pros. Number one, repeatability, and it is customizable, right? I've got a tabletop here that's about 60 inches by 70 inches, and I wanted 2/3 of that to be styled like an MFT top. How else am I going to do that? There's other kits out there. I could get a 3/4, bit, and I could drill through a bunch, draw a bunch of lines out and do that. This gave me a really repeatable, accurate way of doing this. And I can tell you from using this for a couple months now, the geometry of this is dead on. I am getting perfect 90-degree cuts. I've done some wide cross cuts on some boards, and it is perfect. So even with that little bit of wobble, everything came out great with the geometry of it. And I would have had to pay somebody with a CNC or bought a bunch of equipment otherwise, a drill bit or some of the other jigs that are out on the market. So for me, having the repeatability to be able to do this again, if I ever replace this top, and the fact that I've got an MFT3, that if I ever need to, I can bust this kit out and fix one up for that, that made it worth it for me. The other thing I think is, again, the price is actually not bad if you're someone who's going through a lot of MFT tops. So if you're somebody who is out there doing, on-site work, a lot of trim work, whatever, and you've got an MFT3 and you abuse that thing, and you are replacing a top multiple times a year, that sort of thing. Again, if the price of a top is anywhere from 70 to 125 bucks, well, within 2 to 3 tops, you've already paid for this for the most part. Obviously, maybe 3, 4 when you take in the cost of MDF and everything. But again, this is something that you can use and abuse your MFT3s, make your own tops over and over again. And again, if it's something custom, like I'm doing with this outfeed bench, there's just not a lot of other great ways to do that are this easy, right in-house. So in that sense, I think that's a pro. And finally, this is for sure, in my mind, the Woodpeckers quality that you're used to if you are someone who owns other Woodpeckers tools. Yes, there may be a little bit of wobble, but I think everything comes so well organized. Everything comes in good condition, and it works really well. And again, from a user standpoint, having used this for cross-cutting and for clamping, it's perfect. The geometry is great, so even that little bit of wobble that there may have been didn't affect my geometry at all. I'm getting 90-degree cross cuts. I've got great clamping, and it worked out perfectly for me. All right, so at the end of the day, would I recommend that you buy this? Well, that depends. If you're somebody who's going through a lot of MFT tops, if you're someone who's making a big custom tabletop solution that you need these MFT style dog holes for, or again, you're making something like this and you see yourself potentially needing to make new ones or different ones in the future, I think it's absolutely worth the investment, and I would definitely recommend you do it. My one recommendation to do different from what I did is get yourself a better bit. My bit was old and dull, so it was having a lot of trouble. I think a new bit would have plowed through this much, much quicker. On the other hand, if you are kind of a hobbyist who is using an MFT and you're using it infrequently, and it's got one little kerf line on it from where you make your cuts every time, there's no other holes or damage to it, and it lasts for a long time, probably not. If you're somebody who's making a very small section of MFT dog holes onto a workbench, and you're not that concerned about making perfect crosscuts, you just want them for holding capabilities and clamping capabilities, then I would say no, not really. Just draw, strike a line, measure out where you want your dogs, get a 3/4 bit, drill those things, right? So it really depends on what you're doing. So if you're looking at a bigger project, if you're using a lot of MFT 3 tops, absolutely. If you're not, if you've got an MFT top you think is going to last you the life of your woodworking career, or you're just doing a few holes in a workbench for clamping and not worried about that crosscut geometry that the MFT 3 gets you, probably not for you. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something from this. If you did, please drop a like. Every little bit helps. I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification button so that you know when future videos are coming. If you haven't watched my build series on my outfeed assembly bench with an MFT style top, we're gonna put links right here, and there's links in the description. Make sure you go and check those out, especially to see how I did this top and how things turned out with it. So the next video coming up is going to be a shop tour. I'm gonna show you guys around my garage, show you what I've got, what I do here. So again, if you want to see that, make sure that you follow, make sure that you subscribe. Check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, and on TikTok, Garage Dwellers Woodworking. Thanks for watching, and until next time, get out there and enjoy your garage.